Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Back to Ashes. It's nice to see you. My name is Phoenix. To my elites, my love comes back to you tenfold. If you are new to the channel and you begin to like what you are hearing, why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button, set your notification bell to all, that way you know every time I upload a video. And it also shows that you support non-AI garbage. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes. So sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Creepy Ghost Stories. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. I'll read the first story, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Enjoy. I never imagined that having an entire dorm floor to myself would feel so wrong. When I first arrived, the long hallway stretched out silent and empty. No footsteps, no doors, opening or closing. Just me. It was peaceful at first. Then came the sounds from 217. He appeared to be a tall black man, always in loose pajamas, like someone who hadn't left his room in days. My friends and I caught glimpses of him early on, but what none of us could ignore were the screams. They started after midnight and ripped through the stillness. Raw, frantic cries of someone begging for help. Not rage, not argument, just pure terror and desperation repeating the same plea over and over. We told ourselves he must be having some kind of breakdown, maybe severe anxiety, maybe something worse. We laughed nervously about it during the day, but at night, those screams crawled under our skin and stayed there. One evening, the cries felt particularly unbearable. I walked down the corridor, heart hammering, and stood outside 217. I knocked twice. The screaming cut off instantly, as though a switch had been flipped. No footsteps approached the door. No voice answered. Just thick, sudden silence that felt heavier than the noise. The next morning, I marched straight to the housing office, ready to insist they check on the resident who clearly needed intervention. The coordinator tilted her head, puzzled. "That room's been vacant all semester," she said. "You're the only person assigned to that wing." The words landed like ice water. I tried to explain. We had seen him, heard him, multiple people, but the more I spoke, the more impossible it sounded, even to me. We started asking questions. Old residents, maintenance staffs, anyone who might know something. Eventually, the pieces came together. Years earlier, a student had lived in 217. He'd been quietly unraveling for months, reaching out in small, indirect ways that no one recognized as cries for help. One night, he gave up waiting for someone to notice. His death was ruled a homicide. But the building carried older wounds. Long before it was a college, the structure had served as a military hospital during World War I. The basement laundry room, where we'd always wrinkled our noses at the sour metallic smell, and of course avoided the faint reddish-brown smears that never quite come clean, had once been the morgue. Knowing the history didn't stop the sounds. Night after night, the same anguished voice would rise, calling for rescue that never arrived. It wasn't vengeful. It was simply still waiting. Eventually, the cries faded away. I moved out at the end of the term and never returned to that floor. But I still remember lying awake in the dark listening to a plea that had been echoing for decades. First unanswered in life and then unanswered in death. Some silences are louder than screams, and some help, once missed, keeps asking forever. Looking back, wandering through a ghost neighborhood during the height of the housing crash was probably not the smartest way to lend our afternoons. This happened around 2007 or 2008 to me and my closest friend. We were both in our early 20s, roommates in a mid sized city. Not tiny, not huge. Behind our apartment complex ran a thin strip of woods, and on the other side sat an entire subdivision of single family homes that looked like they had been paused mid-life. Perfectly ordinary suburb streets, cul-de-sacs, two-car garages, basketball hoops still mounted above garages, except every single house stood empty. The Great Recession was still biting hard. Some developer had purchased the whole tract, intending to level it for something newer and shinier. That evening, paved a fresh access road from the main highway right up to the entrance. Then the money dried up. The bulldozers never arrived. The same thing had happened to half a dozen other half built projects nearby. No stores, no gas stations, no neighbors. Just silent houses and overgrown lawns. Quietly unsettling, but never outright terrifying. We were young, restless, and stuck on opposite retail schedules, so we had plenty of daylight hours to kill. The abandoned neighborhood became our favorite walking loop. A quick trail through the trees brought us onto the gravel entrance road that gradually smoothed into proper asphalt as you reached the larger, more modern homes far in. We'd wander back and forth talking about everything and nothing, sometimes sneaking a joint, sometimes spreading a blanket in the big open field attached to one of the bigger lots and just lying there staring at clouds. On the afternoon this happened, the weather was perfect. Bright sun, cloudless blue sky, late summer or early autumn vibes, middle of the day. We felt perfectly at ease until we didn't. We were strolling along when a small blue hatchback appeared ahead, coming toward us. First vehicle we'd seen in there. Two people inside. I couldn't make out much detail, just that the driver appeared to be a white guy with brown hair wearing blue and white raglan baseball style shirt. We didn't get a clear view of the passenger. The car rolled past on the gravel, tires crunching, and disappeared around a bend. Odd, but not alarming, so we kept walking. A few minutes later, the same car came back the other way, passing us from behind and heading toward the hill at the far end of the street. We struggled. Maybe they'd realized the road went nowhere and turned around. We carried on, reached the crest of the little hill, and there was the blue hatchback, yet again. Stopped dead in the middle of the road, maybe 10 yards ahead, brake lights glowing red, engine idling. That's when I realized the passenger seat was empty. My brain immediately tried to gaslight itself. Maybe I'd only imagined seeing someone else in the car. Then my friend said quietly, "Wait, wasn't there another person?" Everything changed in that moment. The car just sat there, not moving, not turning off, just waiting. And there was nowhere reasonable the passenger could have been dropped. No house they'd stopped at, no side path, nothing, just empty pavement and empty houses. We stood frozen at the top of the hill, staring. My stomach turned to ice. The hair on my arms and neck lifted. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both understood the geometry. One person, possibly already behind us, somewhere among the houses or trees, and the car ahead blocking the only easy way out. Time stretched horribly. I remember thinking, no one knows we're here. My boyfriend wouldn't be home from work for hours. No cell service worth a damn back then, anyway. Then the brake lights flared brighter. The car started reversing straight towards us, fast. Adrenaline finally punched through the paralysis. We spun and bolted, cutting hard through the nearest backyard, crushing through overgrown shrubs and low branches, tearing down the short wooded path until we burst out onto the far side of our apartment complex. We didn't slow down until we were inside our building, hearts hammering, doors locked behind us. I still don't know what or who they were, what they wanted, or where the second person went. Whomever was driving that blue hatchback that day. Let's never cross paths again. Coweta, Oklahoma, a quiet, historic little town, steeped in Native American roots and eerie legends, shaped my earliest years. As a young child, I called 3 different homes. They're my own, each one touched by something otherworldly that still sends chills down my spine. Our first house sat directly across from the thick stretch of woods where my 3 siblings and I loved to explore. One day, when I was only about 4, we ventured deeper into the woods than ever before. We stumbled upon a crumbling old shack hidden in the undergrowth. As we approached, the line of leaves suddenly shifted into the air to my left, moving in a perfect unnatural row as though swept by an invisible force. Yet the air felt completely still. The motion halted abruptly right in front of me. Then a booming, gravelly male sound echoed from every direction. Get out. We bolted, hearts pounding. Being the smallest and youngest, I somehow outran the rest. From then on, I frequently spotted an elderly man standing silently at the wood's edge, as if standing centennial. He never approached us, just watched. When my mother noticed my reluctance to go near the trees, she asked why. I explained that there was a mean old man who didn't want us there anymore. She dismissed it as childish imagination, and we carried on. After a couple of years away, following my parents' split, Mom relocated us to the modest 2-bedroom home rental near the schools. She took the pull-out sofa in the living room, leaving the bedrooms to us kids. The place backed right up to a cemetery, which naturally drew our curious young selves to wander amongst the headstones. There was one man in his early 30s who visited daily, always at his mother's plot. Rain or shine, morning or afternoon, he'd be there with packed meals, settling in for hours, chatting animatedly as though engaged in lively conversation with someone seated across from him. My siblings and I would sneak behind nearby markers, straining to catch his words, but we never could. His gestures and expressions were so relaxed and natural. It felt like he truly had company. One time, my older brother and I crept especially close, thinking we'd gone undetected. Simply, he rose, spun around, locked eyes, and snapped. "What are you looking at, kid?" His voice then shifted into a strange, deliberate stream of unintelligible sounds. Not quite a real language, more like carefully crafted nonsense. It unnerved me deeply. Whether he was toying with us or something more sinister was happening. I avoided that section of the graveyard afterward. Before long, we relocated again, this time to a house downtown on a quiet side street. Coetta's main drag was just one modest row of old buildings, but history ran deep beneath the surface. That particular street had originally been a part of a burial ground for the town's early days in the 1840s. When development came, the graves were supposedly relocated, but not all of them. Through unsupervised childhood adventures in the 1990s, I discovered headstones still resting in the crawl spaces beneath at least three nearby homes. One ancient, two-story white house stood just a block away. Families came and went quickly, rarely lasting more than a few months. It sat vacant much of the time. One day, my older brother, our loyal cat, and I snuck into its crawl space to investigate. We tried to flip a weathered stone for a better look under our flashlight beams. As we touched it, an unearthly hiss erupted, not from any single animal, but a chorus of overlapping voices in varying pitches, all hissing together. Every hair on my body was standing straight up. We scrambled out in panic, brother first, cat second. As I reached the sidewalk, I watched in horror as my cat was suddenly lifted and hurled through the air. Then an unseen hand seized my hair, yanking me backward to the ground. Tears streamed as terror overwhelmed me. My cat fled to hide in Mom's closet and refused to emerge until the following day. I limped away with a massive, painful bruise on my right buttock, making it agony to even walk past the house afterwards. But in our town, built atop those 14 graves, I repeatedly encountered an elderly woman. She appeared to others occasionally, but I saw her most often, usually after dark, though sometimes in daylight too. At night, I'd walk to find her standing beside my dresser, right in front of the open door, silhouetted by the hallway light Mom always left burning. She'd stare silently, lips moving without a sound. Several times she reached out to touch my box of crayons on the dresser. The next morning, they'd be covered in mold and completely dried out, unusable. Mom replaced them without comment, never believing my stories. Other disturbances plagued that house. Appliances switching on by themselves, heavy footsteps pacing, faint whispers, doorknobs turning and rattling with no one there. Those years in Coetta left me with a childhood filled with genuine fear and the unshakable sense that some things from the past refuse to stay buried. And here's another incident that happened. At 7 years old, I was still living in the quiet town of Coetta, Oklahoma, within the traditional lands of the Muskogee Creek Nation. One of my closest friends was a Cherokee girl, let's call her Jade, whose family had deep roots there. Her great great grandfather had purchased land long ago and constructed a simple 3-bedroom house that had been handed down through generations. By then, it belonged to her father. Many family members have passed away inside those walls over the decades, and one presence in particular refused to leave: Jade's grandmother. To Jade, this was just part of daily life. Grandma would quietly rummage through the kitchen cabinets at night, apparently checking that the family had plenty of food stocked away. To keep the doors closed, Jade's family tied ponytail holders around the handles. You could often hear soft footsteps padding through the house, and Grandma was courteous. She always knocked gently on the door before gliding through it. For Jade, this was ordinary. For me, it was downright frightening. Grandma, however, did not approve of me. According to Jade, she sensed something dark clinging to me, something malevolent. Whenever I visited, objects would topple from tables without cause. Lights flickered wildly on and off. Cabinets strained under their makeshift locks. And I'd wake in the middle of the night to find a shadowy form hovering nearby, staring silently. Sometimes the banging on the walls and doors would startle me awake. Jade would calmly call out, "Grandma, that's enough." And the disturbances would pause for a little while. I only slept over a few times. The fear always won out. A couple of years later, when we were around 9 or 10, Jade hosted a slumber party. While exploring her sister's room, we discovered an old Ouija board tucked away. Curiosity got the better of us, and we decided to try it out. We made contact quickly, but not with Grandma. The board spelled out the name Odysseus, or something close to that spelling. We asked questions, half joking, half serious. I was convinced one of the other girls was secretly guiding the planchette, so I challenged whatever was there. "If you're real, give us a sign. Knock 3 times," or whatever I demanded. Whatever happened next was terrifying enough that we panicked, yanked the board away, and tossed it in the trash, even though it belonged to Jade's sister, who would surely be furious. After that scare, the mood lightened. We drew silly faces on whoever fell asleep first, sneaked into one girl's bag and scooped ice cream into her bra, then stashed it in the freezer to reinsert later without melting. Swapped ghost stories and laughed until our sides hurt. Finally, we all drifted off, sprawled across sleeping bags and blankets on the living room floor. Sometime in the night, I jolted awake to faint whispering and the near miss of a foot almost stepping on my head. I rolled over, expecting to see one of the girls up for a bathroom break, but instead caught sight of a tall, dark silhouette standing unnervingly close. I told myself it was just my mind playing tricks and squeezed my eyes shut to go back to sleep. Then, the lights began snapping on and off in frantic bursts. In the kitchen, cabinet doors were violently yanked open, snapping most of the ponytail holders that held them shut. Drawers shot out, utensils clattered, and the refrigerator door swung wide. The commotion roused several of us and brought Jade's parents hurrying in. Her mother stepped into the chaos, looking ready to lecture us. But one glance at our wide-eyed, terrified faces told her this wasn't a prank. She muttered something like, "What the hell?" under her breath, began quietly putting things back in place and tried to reassure us it was only Grandma making her usual nightly rounds to check the food supply. Nothing to be afraid of. Somehow, I managed to fall back asleep amid the lingering tension. The next morning, the entire house felt oppressively heavy, as though the air itself had thickened and breathing became an effort. Once everybody was up, we agreed we needed to get out and suggested swimming. One of the girls stayed underwater far longer than normal and surfaced in tears, insisting something had grabbed her ankle and held her down. I brushed it off as nerves or imagination. Later, we moved to the backyard trampoline. That's when a real panic set in. One girl was suddenly lifted, suspended, motionless in midair for several long seconds before dropping. Screams erupted. Everyone scattered in terror. We packed up and went home as fast as we could. Not long afterward, Jade told me she had fallen hard on the trampoline after the rest of us left and broken her arm. She was convinced someone or something had shoved her. After that incident, she never invited me back over. Our friendship quietly faded, and we drifted apart. Those nights in that old family home remain some of the most unsettling memories of my childhood in Coweta. Locals near this artificial lake, which borders the remnants of an old resort development, often share eerie tales of sorcery, hidden rituals, dark silhouettes drifting across or above the water, and shadowy shapes lurking in the dense forest that encircles both the lake and the decaying resort structures. These unsettling accounts started gaining traction in the mid 1960s, soon after the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers dammed the upstream river and raised the water level to create the current lake. What few people discuss openly, and the main reason the exact spot stays undisclosed, is that an old pioneer burial ground was completely submerged during the flooding in early 1960s. The original smaller lake stretched roughly 2 miles from northwest to northeast, with the resort situated along its western shore. The cemetery lay approximately 700 to 800 yards from the cul-de-sac I described in an earlier story. Today, standing at that cul-de-sac and looking northeast, you see only open water about 500 yards distant. Veteran residents who worked for the Corps or served in local police back then have explained that tight budgets and pressing deadlines led to the decision against relocating most of the graves to other sites. Prominent local families managed to have their loved ones exhumed and reburied in larger cemeteries outside town prior to the inundation. But official records of removals are incomplete or missing entirely for the majority of the interments. As mentioned before, the whole resort and lake venture collapsed into bankruptcy long before it could turn a profit or reach full completion. A handful of the result properties did eventually find buyers, but plenty sat empty and fell into ruin under the neglect of a distant out of state real estate firm that snapped up the land at a bargain basement price. In the early 1970s, however, county and municipal authorities stepped in to revitalize the lake's immediate surroundings for public recreation. My dad, who patrolled as a county deputy during that period, shared many recollections from my childhood about he and his partner frequently answered calls from boaters, besides residents and visitors, who discovered human bones or half submerged remains washing up, almost certainly dislodged from the drowned graveyard. The bad press, combined with the construction of a bigger, more appealing natural lake elsewhere in the county, thanks to another dam project, caused visitor numbers and local use to drop sharply through the 1980s. Many property owners sold off their resort homes, leaving the zone largely deserted. A few longtime families held on. From conversations with my father and other seasoned officers, the isolated resort and lake became notorious for break ins, violent attacks, and even the occasional homicide, much like the incident I referenced earlier. Things shifted again in the early 1990s when a developer from outside the region purchased land on the lake's eastern shore and constructed a upscale community of luxury residences. During my teenage years in the late 1990s, that eastern section felt secure and received regular police attention, but both law enforcement and townspeople avoided the western shore and the old resort zone. In high school, my friends and I, more reckless than courageous, often pitched tents in the thickly wooded northwest corner of the lake, hunting for any trace of supernatural activity, since that spot roughly aligned with the submerged cemetery's location. I realize this background runs long, but it provides crucial context for the personal encounters I had with the lake during my high school days and later while on duty as an officer, plus some incidents relayed by my dad and his former colleagues in the county sheriff's office. Here's one of the earliest lake related experiences from my time in law enforcement. In my second year working as a police officer, I took a call around 3:30 a.m. one October night about juveniles wandering in the woods along the lake's northern edge, the same lake from before. Such reports weren't rare, given the semi-public campground that stretched from the north around to the east side of the water. Because the region was so remote, we had posted notices requiring overnight campers to phone dispatch ahead of time with their plans. Staffing on night shift was limited then, so advance notice helped us prioritize patrols of the lake and resort vicinity when necessary. That particular fall evening, no one had checked in as campers when our shift began. After receiving the call, I drove toward the lake and confirmed with dispatch that no notification had come in. They added that residents in the expensive homes on the eastern shore were now phoning about strange lights emerging from the forest. My first assumption was teenagers with powerful flashlights roaming the trails, probably searching for the lost cemetery or hoping to spot something ghostly. I had done exactly that as a teen. We handled similar complaints often, especially in warmer months. What struck me as unusual this time was that it was a weekday night. Kids usually weren't out so late midweek. Normally, I would have asked for a second unit, but the other two officers on duty were busy transporting a prisoner to jail, leaving me to respond solo. Approaching from the city's eastern side, I passed through the luxury neighborhood on the lake's east shore and intended to circle around to the northern campground. Glancing out of my patrol car's window, I spotted two small lights shifting near the opening of the hiking trail on the northwest side. I radioed dispatch to report the activity on the northwest and said I'd be conducting a stop on suspicious persons soon. They replied that they'd contact the sheriff's office for a deputy to assist. per police requiring 2 officers for suspicious person or vehicle calls. By then, I was near the northern campground and the northwest trailhead, yet the lights I'd just seen just moments earlier had vanished. Hoping to relocate them, I switched off all my vehicle lights and parked along the roadside. I figured the kids had noticed my approach and doused their beams to avoid detection. After waiting about 5 minutes, I swept the dense tree line with my spotlight and circled the area. No tents, no vehicles, no bicycles, nothing suggesting recent human presence. A friend from the sheriff's office messaged me on our shared channel to say he was en route from the eastern county and would arrive in 5 to 7 minutes. I shared my position, told him I'd go dark again, and asked him to watch for any lights or movement as he neared from the east. While waiting, I stepped out and began checking the campground on foot. Shortly after nearing a trail entrance, I clearly heard what sounded like children's giggles. I quietly updated the deputy over the radio, saying that I'd located kids near the trailhead and requested he approach without lights too. We went dark to avoid frightening children into fleeing deeper into the woods, which spanned about 20 miles of wooded paths around the lake. The last thing we needed was to pursue scared kids through the maze in the pitch darkness. As I moved toward the source of the laughter, the deputy radioed that he now saw lights in roughly the same spot I'd described. I chuckled and said it was probably just my own light reflecting as I searched. His voice shifted, and he came back with, "Negative. I see your light, but there are 2 more hovering right above you." Right then, the laughter returned, sounding no more than 10 feet away. Seeing nothing ahead, I tilted my head upward and spotted 2 small, throbbing orbs, each smaller than a baseball, drifting among the treetops. They appeared faintly see-through, but glowed distinctly white. By my guess, they hovered at least 8 feet off the ground. At 6'3", that put them well above my reach. I mentioned it. I panicked completely and sprinted back to my patrol car, about 50 feet away. I ducked behind the driver's side and waited for the deputy. Oddly, my police dog stayed sound asleep in the back, unbothered by the whole thing. I tried detailing it over the air, sensing possible real danger, so I simply stayed hidden. Fortunately, the deputy arrived soon after and swept his spotlight across where I'd seen the orbs. He jumped out and asked what had rattled me so bad. I explained everything that happened during his approach. He said that as he rounded into the northern campground, he watched me bolt behind my car while the 2 lights drifted leisurely back into the trees. I then mentioned the giggles I'd heard. Only 3 or 4 minutes had passed from first spotting the lights to hiding, then rechecking with him present. We spent the next 20 minutes combing the tree line with lights, hiking at least half a mile down trails and shouting to draw out any kids. The next morning, dispatch fielded complaints about yelling in the woods and had to explain, awkwardly, that police officers had been searching for potential ghosts. Both of us rattled. We tried devising a rational explanation for the call, especially since multiple witnesses, including disinterested residents, had reported the lights. Unwilling to sound unhinged, I finally radioed dispatch to close it as unfounded, unknown subjects, or vehicle locations. Barely 30 seconds later, the deputy and I both heard the laughter again. We stared at each other in shock, climbed into our cars silently, and left. I quickly radioed him to meet at the eastern campground, about a mile away. There, we stepped out, had a smoke, let my dog stretch, and talked for 15 minutes or so, all while staring toward the spot of the light. Nothing happened. No further reports of lights came in that night or the rest of the week. We never identified the source of the light or confirmed the source of the laughter. Calls like that arrived regularly, but this one stands out as one that felt strange, out of a supernatural thriller. Here's a second encounter from earlier in my career. Not long after starting as an officer in a small southern town close to a state line, I became the only K-9 handler assigned to graveyard shift, covering a sprawling rural patrol zone about 20 miles north-south along a major state highway. I enjoy the quieter Sundays through Tuesdays, free of the usual highway chaos. One Sunday night in July around 2 a.m., dispatch sent me to check on a reported prowler in an old semi-private neighborhood, roughly 5 miles down a narrow two-lane county road off the highway. Policy usually called for 2 units on such calls. I was closest. My backup was at least 15 miles out. Unease set in the moment I reached the neighborhood. Spotlighting houses as I drove through, I realized most appeared vacant or served only as a cheap seasonal getaway. The whole place felt aged and run down, with many structures looking deserted. From local lore, I heard growing up this development had originally been envisioned as part of a resort tied to a man made lake, but development in housing came in the late 1960s after the original backers went under. While waiting for backup, I exited my vehicle for a foot patrol around the reported house. I updated dispatch on my arrival and asked them to double check the address. They said they were speaking with a reporting party right then, who confirmed seeing my patrol car. That unnerved me further. No homes nearby showed any sign of a living being. My logical side insisted there must be an occupied house further along the dead end road I hadn't reached yet. I returned to my car, swept the spotlight deeper down the cul-de-sac to locate either the caller or the prowler, and asked dispatch if the call originated from a landline. As I hit the end of the road, they confirmed it likely came from one of the houses, not mobile. Switching to our backup channel, I told the approaching officer, let's just call him John, to ease up since I hadn't found anything yet. I made another pass with the spotlight, and dispatch came back insisting the reporting party was watching me from a window and wanted me to stop aiming the light into the house. The house I was illuminating looked unmistakably abandoned from the street. Growing unsettled and a bit annoyed, I decided to approach on foot. I told myself the occupants might have doused lights out of fear, or perhaps squatters were inside the seemingly empty place. Walking up and shining my flashlight over the exterior, chills ran down my spine. The front door was boarded shut, and through windows I could see many interior doors sealed the same way. Circling to the back, I directed my beam through a rear window and froze. There stood a man, late 50s or early 60s, motionless in what looked like a den or bedroom, staring intently toward an adjoining room. The place had no furniture visible. I rapped on the glass to get his attention, just as John pulled up. John looked shaken and urged me to check my canine right away. She was frantically trying to escape her crate. Though John was fairly new and unfamiliar with my dog, I knew her well and trusted something was seriously wrong. So I headed back while telling him to try raising the man. At my patrol car, my dog was in full panic, howling, cowering behavior I'd never seen from her, despite years of working together. I tried soothing her without success. Minutes later, dispatch called to say contact with the reporting party had dropped the static. With everything feeling off, I resolved to find John and suggest closing the call as unfounded, assuming he'd made contact by now. Rounding the house corner, I heard him running toward me. He nearly collided with me and breathlessly described trying to get the man's attention without response. The figure stayed frozen in the same spot. Moving to check other rooms, he'd spotted another man on the floor in an adjacent space, clearly suffering gunshot wounds. Connecting the dots, we realized the standing figure was likely armed. We cleared the house repeatedly. Inside, the air was frigid despite July nighttime temperatures hovering around 80 degrees. No living person or fresh body was anywhere to be found. Comparing notes, we concluded the motionless standing man John saw matched the wounded one on the floor I'd glimpsed earlier. Shaken, we marked the call unfounded and avoided discussing it for weeks. Later, a veteran officer joined us for dinner and, amused, asked about our visit to the address. He had handled calls there years prior. Pressed for details, he explained a burglary gone wrong. An intruder argued with the homeowner, shouting, then fled, sparking a week-long search. He added the department had fielded calls to that house since the 1980s. During my 5 years at the agency, we logged at least 15 calls to that location while I was working. After my first run-in, I made a point of steering clear so newer officers would take the initial response. In the human lowlands where my mom worked her nursing shifts, the emergency department sometimes saw strange clusters of cases among people with chronic mental health struggles. These weren't tied to lunar phases or anything superstitious, but certain shared delusions would sweep through the regulars like a quiet wave. One chaotic morning, Mom clocked in to find the place overflowing. Colleagues pulled her aside right away. It was turning into one of those shifts. Already, 5 patients known for psychiatric histories had arrived with self-inflicted burns. The injuries mostly scorched their chests, shoulders, and arms to varying degrees of seriousness. People had swung by to investigate, worried about a possible arsonist targeting vulnerable people. But the patients insisted they'd done it themselves. No mention of anyone else involved. A handful of bystanders hadn't spotted anything suspicious either. To avoid drawing media attention and further distressing already fragile individuals, the team kept things under wraps, chalking it up to one of those eerie coincidences that sometimes happen in psych-heavy ERs. As the day wore on into dusk, staff hustled to transfer the burn victims to specialized units. Some were critically injured, but even the more alert ones were disruptive, restrained and shouting hysterically that they were cooking or burning up inside. Nothing external showed they were literally on fire, yet their panic rippled through the waiting area, unnerving families and other patients. Just when it seemed the bizarre surge might be over, dispatch radioed about an incoming critical case. A homeless man with extensive abdominal burns was en route. He had a long record of alcohol and substance issues, but no prior self harm notations. The EMTs delivering him appeared rattled. Mom knew one of them well, so after the patient was handed off to the trauma team, she checked in. The paramedic described arriving under an overpass to find the man laying motionless, flames licking across his midsection. He hadn't screamed, struggled, or tried to extinguish himself, just lay there silently as his shirt remained oddly unburned in places. The caller from a nearby station had been hysterical. They doused the fire, rushed him in, but the damage wasn't devastating. On the quick transport, nothing explained how the blaze started or why he stayed conscious yet unresponsive. Tragically, he didn't survive. During autopsy, doctors found his internal organs severely charred, lower ribs scorched black, while the exterior burns didn't fully account for the death. It resembled an internal ignition without evidence of any explosive accelerant or swallowed substance. Officially, the death certificate listed thermal injuries, kept vague. Unofficially, staff whispered the phrase everyone was thinking: spontaneous human combustion. Mom had always been the steady one, calm under pressure, kind without being overly soft, skilled at de escalating tense moments. That's why she often ended up assigned to the most challenging or agitated patients. Even after unsettling events, she kept volunteering for those assignments, showing remarkable grace. Then there was Gary, a frequent visitor everyone knew. Friendly and chatty most days, but he clung stubbornly to a unusual fixed delusion. He believed he could transform himself into a snake. In bad episodes, he'd coil on the floor, hiss dramatically, though he was never aggressive. He was also HIV positive, back when AIDS fears ran high, and treatment came with the extra stigma, meaning he often got shuffled to staff willing to care for him without hesitation. Gary ordered Mom because she joked that she wasn't scared of snakes, and they'd chat amicably during their visits, usually for self inflicted injuries or med noncompliance. One evening, Gary tried to acute distress. They secured him in full 4-point restraints, adding a roll belt, hand mitts, and placed him in a monitored room near the nurse's station while waiting for sedatives to take effect. Standard protocol, since those meds could sometimes be wriggled out of. Mom stepped away briefly for a break. On her return, she spotted Gary, somehow, wandering the hallway from his room. She approached gently, urging him to return to bed. He spun around and bellowed, "I'm a snake," then lunged. He jabbed her arm with a stolen needle, pinned her against the wall, and began choking her. An orderly heard the scuffle and pulled him off just in time. The wait for her HIV test results that month felt endless. Even though I was too young to fully grasp it, it was a terrifying ordeal. But here's where it turns truly inexplicable. Every restraint, 4 points, roll belt, mitt was found still fastened and buckled in place on the empty bed. Even assuming he somehow slipped them, improbable given the setup, the nurse's station had constant eyes on that hallway. No one saw that door open. No one saw him exit. No one witnessed him walking past the bustle of staff and patients to risk the distant locker area where he must have grabbed the needle. He simply appeared where he shouldn't have been able to go. To this day, no rational explanation has resurfaced for how Gary escaped unseen. Some things in the ER, it seems, defy easy answers. This is a memory from my childhood that has never faded, even after more than 2 decades. I feel compelled to put it into words now. Back when I was 7 or 8 years old, I can't pin down the exact age. I used to spend weekends at my grandparents' home in the rural hills of Bosnia. Their place was about an hour's drive from the city, nestled amid thick woods with only a handful of neighboring houses scattering along a narrowing, curving dirt road. We arrived early one Saturday morning, but our car suffered a sudden flat tire right where the road branched off into a shadowy forest path. Since we were so near my grandparents' house, and I knew the surroundings like the back of my hand from countless previous visits, my parents allowed me to wander a little while my father changed the tire. It was still morning, around 9 or 10 o'clock, bright enough that they felt comfortable letting me explore nearby. Naturally adventurous, a trait I haven't outgrown, I ignored the boring main track and veered onto the wooded trail instead. The canopy overhead was thick and towering, casting the path in a perpetual dimness, even in the daylight. I walked perhaps a couple of 100 meters before reaching a point where the trail split into several directions, a true crossroads in the forest. What happened next remains etched into my mind with unusual clarity. Right at the center of that intersection, where the paths diverge, there was a small, dark opening in the earth, like a shallow cave or burrow. Drawn by curiosity, I edged closer. Inside that blackness, tiny lights flickered, almost like daytime fireflies dancing in the void, though I later wondered if fireflies even glow by day. More than that, I sensed something alive there, an undeniable presence, as though the hole itself was watching me, quietly inviting me to step inside. Then I saw them, several small glowing red eyes staring out from the depths. My heart leaped into my throat. In that region of Southeast Europe, dangerous wildfire is rare near homes. Wolves or bears are occasional, but seldom venture so close. So my first panic thought was some kind of animal den. Fear took over. I backed away slowly, never turning my back until I was safely down the trail. Nothing pursued me. I returned to the car without incident and kept the whole thing to myself, certain my parents would scold me and ground me from further adventures that weekend. Later that day, my parents decided to head back home and leave me with my grandparents until Monday. I was especially close to my grandmother. We've always shared a similar temperament, and I couldn't hold back the story any longer. I told her everything. She chuckled gently at first. Sweetheart, there's nothing like that there. I walk those paths daily. But I insisted I'd seen it clearly, so she humored me. We set off together that afternoon to check out the spot. It was a short walk from her house. When we reached the crossroads, nothing. No cave, no opening, just ordinary ground where the trails met. No sign of recent digging or filling. She asked if I was sure of the location. I nodded firmly. She smiled, attributing it to a child's lively imagination, but gently warned me not to wander there alone anymore. We continued our stroll, and I dropped the subject after that. Yet the scene had stayed razor sharp in my memory. All these years, I know how memories can warp and invent details over time, how the brain patches gaps with fiction. But this didn't feel fabricated. The details hold steady. I sometimes wonder what might have happened if I'd taken one more step forward, or worse, crawled into that darkness. I've since read accounts of eerie forest locations worldwide, places said to bend reality, portals to other times and dimensions, spots where people vanished into something beyond our world. Could this have been one? My grandparents eventually left that rural home. My grandfather passed away when I was 16, and my grandmother moved to the city, into the same building as my parents and me. We still own the property, though it's largely reclaimed by wild growth now. My father visits occasionally to maintain it, but with utilities disconnected, it's hardly livable. As an adult with a long standing fascination for the unexplained, I feel a strong pull to return. One day soon, during a break from work, I intend to drive out there, walk that old road, if it's still passable, and stand again at that crossroads. I want to see if the same sensation lingers, if anything stirs. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true creepy ghost stories. I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge the rest of the membership of Back to Ashes. Thank you all so much for holding up this channel and your dedicated support. Without you, as I always like to say, I wouldn't have a voice and I would be sitting here reading to myself, which I don't find fun. I would rather narrate them, so thank you. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these collections. Until next time, please take care of yourself and stay vigilant. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.